My name is Irene Thompson, 65 years old, and today marks 3 weeks since I lay alone in the ICU, watching my phone screen remain silent as my only son, Noah, celebrated his wife's birthday instead. The doctors said I was lucky to survive that heart attack. As I swallowed cold Jell-O in my hospital bed, I made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes, love means letting go, even when it breaks your heart. Before I tell you what happened that night in the hospital, let me know where you're watching from and click that subscribe button if you've ever felt forgotten by someone you love. I used to have what most people would call a beautiful life. For 40 years, my husband Frank and I built our home in a quiet suburb outside Boston. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite spots on the couch. Frank was my rock, my compass, my everything. When cancer took him 3 years ago, the house felt impossibly large and empty, but I still had Noah, our only son. Noah was always such a bright light in our lives. From the moment he was born, he had Frank's curious eyes and my stubborn determination. We poured everything into him, every dream, every hope. I still remember how Frank would toss him into the air when he was just a toddler, those belly laughs echoing through our kitchen. Or how Noah would climb into our bed during thunderstorms, his small body curled between us feeling safe. He grew into such a fine young man. Graduated top of his class, got that engineering job in the city, always called me twice a week, just to chat. Noah was the last living piece of Frank I had left. When I looked at him, I could see shadows of his father, especially around the eyes when he smiled. That connection meant everything to me after Frank passed. The house we lived in, it was more than just walls and a roof. It was where Frank carried me over the threshold as newlyweds, where Noah took his first steps across the living room floor, where we celebrated 40 Christmases with ornaments marking each year of our lives together. Every scratch in the hardwood, every slight imperfection in the paint, had a story behind it. Frank and I had sacrificed so much for that house, working extra shifts cutting corners where we could just to give Noah a stable home. We went without vacations for years to pay for Noah's college tuition. Frank kept driving his old truck long after it should have been replaced, just so we could help Noah with the down payment on his first car. When he announced his engagement to Audrey, I sold some of my jewelry pieces Frank had given me over the years to help pay for their beautiful wedding. I never told Noah about that. What was the point? A mother gives without expecting anything in return, right? Even after they were married, I continued to help them financially whenever I could. When they were saving for their first house, I gave them $20,000 toward their down payment. It was money Frank and I had set aside for retirement. But what good was it doing just sitting in an account? I wanted to see them happy in their own home while I was still around to enjoy it. But something started changing after Noah married Audrey. At first, the shifts were subtle, almost imperceptible. The twice-weekly calls became once a week, then every other week. When he did call, he was always in a rush, always had somewhere else to be. Our Sunday dinners became monthly, then special occasions only. I told myself it was normal that young couples need their space to build their own lives. After Frank died, the loneliness hit me like a physical weight. I would walk from room to room in our big house, touching Frank's things, talking to him sometimes when no one was around to hear me. I hoped Noah would be around more, knowing I was alone now, but it seemed like the opposite happened. He became even more distant, always busy with work or plans with Audrey's family. I kept his room exactly as it was when he left for college, though I knew he would never live there again. Sometimes I would sit on his bed and look at his high school trophies, his collection of science fiction books, and wonder where the time had gone. How did my little boy, who once couldn't fall asleep without his stuffed dinosaur, become this distant man who could barely make time for a phone call with his mother? I first met Audrey 5 years ago when Noah brought her home for Thanksgiving. She was pretty with long auburn hair and a quick smile. She brought a homemade pumpkin pie and complimented my table settings. I liked her immediately, mostly because of how Noah's face lit up whenever she entered a room. That's all any mother really wants, to see her child happy. Their wedding day was beautiful. I remember standing in the church watching my handsome son waiting at the altar, thinking how proud Frank would have been. I wore blue Frank's favorite color, feeling like he was there with me somehow. Noah hugged me so tight that day, whispered, "I love you, Mom," in my ear. I thought everything was going to be perfect. But after the honeymoon, little things started to change with Audrey. The warm smiles became more forced. The compliments stopped altogether. The first time they came for dinner as a married couple, Audrey picked at her food, and later I overheard her telling Noah the chicken was dry. I spent the next week practicing my roast chicken recipe, determined to get it right for their next visit. When they did come over, Audrey would often make comments about the house. "These curtains are so dated, Irene. Have you thought about updating them?" Or, "This furniture must be from the 80s. Vintage is in, but this is just old." Each comment stung, but I would smile and say I was considering making some changes, even though I loved everything about my home just as it was. Every piece had been chosen with Frank, each had a memory attached. Noah never defended me during these comments. Sometimes he would look uncomfortable, but mostly he seemed to agree with Audrey. "Mom's house is pretty old school," he would say with a shrug. I didn't recognize my son in those moments, the boy I raised to be kind and considerate of others' feelings. The visits became shorter and less frequent. Noah always had an excuse. Work was busy. They were renovating their new house. Audrey's parents needed help with something. I understood busy lives, but it hurt to realize I was no longer a priority. The phone calls were brief too, Noah often putting me on speaker while I could hear him doing other things, not really listening. I tried so hard to build a relationship with Audrey. I invited her for lunch, just us girls. I asked about her interests, her family. I remembered her birthday with thoughtful gifts, things I had noticed she might like. I even took a cooking class to learn how to make gluten-free desserts after she mentioned a sensitivity. But my efforts were rarely reciprocated. Audrey always had a reason why she couldn't make it to lunch. "Work is crazy right now," or "I promised my mom I would help her with something." The gifts I gave were acknowledged with a quick thank you, then never mentioned again. I once saw the scarf I had knitted for her, something that took me weeks to complete, being used as a doggy blanket for their pug. Noah seemed oblivious to the tension, or perhaps he just chose not to see it. Whenever I tried to talk to him about feeling excluded from their lives, he would get defensive. "Mom, we're just busy building our own life. You need to make your own friends, find your own hobbies. You can't expect us to entertain you all the time." Those words hurt more than he could know. I wasn't looking to be entertained. I just wanted to be part of their lives, to have my son still be part of mine. I started dreading family gatherings because of the tension. Thanksgiving at their house last year was particularly difficult. Audrey's entire family was there laughing and sharing stories while I sat quietly at the end of the table feeling like an outsider. Noah barely spoke to me the entire evening. On the drive home, I cried the whole way, missing Frank terribly. He would have known what to say, how to handle this. He always knew how to make people feel comfortable and valued. Without him, I felt invisible in my own family. I started noticing changes in my health about 6 months ago. Nothing dramatic at first, just feeling more tired than usual, getting winded climbing the stairs to my bedroom. I chalked it up to getting older, to the grief that still weighed heavily on me 3 years after losing Frank. The volunteer work at our local library became my lifeline during this time. 3 days a week, I would help organize children's reading programs or assist elderly patrons with finding large print books. The other volunteers became friends, particularly Louise, who had lost her husband around the same time I lost Frank. We would sometimes get coffee after our shifts, talking about our children and grandchildren. Louise had 4 grandkids and would show me pictures constantly. I never told her how much that hurt, sometimes knowing Noah and Audrey showed no interest in starting a family. When the fatigue got worse and I started experiencing occasional chest pains, I tried mentioning it to Noah during one of our infrequent phone calls. "It's probably just stress, Mom," he said dismissively. "Everyone gets aches and pains at your age." At my age, as if 65 made me ancient and falling apart. "I was thinking maybe you could go with me to the doctor next week," I suggested cautiously, "just to be safe." There was a pause on the line. "Next week is crazy at work, Mom. End of quarter stuff. But I can probably take you the week after if you really think it's necessary." I never brought it up again after that. Instead, I made the appointment myself and took a taxi there since my vision had been occasionally blurring, making me nervous about driving. The doctor, Dr. Martin, was concerned enough about my symptoms to run several tests. She mentioned family history, stress levels, diet. I admitted that since Frank died, I hadn't been cooking proper meals for myself most days. What was the point of cooking for one? A week later, Dr. Martin called with my test results. My blood pressure was dangerously high, my cholesterol levels concerning. "Irene, these are warning signs we need to take seriously," she said gently. "I'm prescribing medication, but we need to monitor you closely. Do you have family nearby who can check in on you?" I thought about Noah, how he lived just 30 minutes away, but might as well have been on another continent. "Yes," I lied. "My son lives nearby." I tried calling Noah that evening to tell him about the doctor's warnings. The call went to voicemail. I tried again the next morning. Voicemail again. Finally, I sent a text message. "Had some concerning test results from the doctor. Nothing to panic about, but wanted to let you know." His response came 5 hours later. "Sorry to hear that, Mom. What did they say?" I spent 10 minutes typing out a detailed explanation of my condition, the medication, the doctor's concerns. His reply was 2 words: "Stay positive." Later that week, while scrolling through Facebook trying to feel some connection to my son's life through the photos he posted, I saw an event invitation on his page. Audrey's 30th birthday bash, scheduled for the following weekend. The invitation was elaborate, mentioning a rented venue, live music, catered food. Clearly this was a big deal. And clearly I hadn't been invited. I stared at that invitation for a long time, wondering if it had been an oversight. Maybe my invitation was lost in the mail. But deep down, I knew better. I finally worked up the courage to call Noah and casually mention I had seen the party announcement. "Oh yeah," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "It's just a thing with friends and Audrey's family. Nothing fancy." Nothing fancy, despite the detailed description of the catered food and live band. "I see," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, I hope you both have a wonderful time." "Thanks, Mom. Hey, I promise I'll come by to see you the day after the party, okay? We can catch up then." I agreed, though the promise felt hollow, like so many others he had made and broken over the past few years. Still, I marked the day on my calendar and even bought ingredients to make his favorite apple pie. Maybe this time would be different. The night of Audrey's birthday party, I was alone in my house as usual. I had taken my medication with dinner, a frozen meal heated in the microwave, and was settling in to watch a mystery show Frank and I used to enjoy together. Around 8:30, I felt a strange pressure in my chest, different from the occasional twinges I had been experiencing. I tried to ignore it at first, taking deep breaths, shifting positions on the couch. But the pressure intensified, spreading across my chest and into my left arm. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead and upper lip. Something was very wrong. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and dialed 911. The operator's calm voice asked what my emergency was, but I found it increasingly difficult to speak. "I think I'm having a heart attack," I managed to whisper. "I'm alone." Those last 2 words echoed in my mind as I gave her my address. I'm alone. Frank gone. Noah at a birthday party. No one to hold my hand through this. As I waited for the ambulance, time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. I thought about Frank, how he had been alone at the hospital when he passed because I had gone home to shower and change clothes. I had always regretted those lost final moments with him. Now I wondered if I would die alone too. I thought about Noah, how he looked on his first day of kindergarten, so brave in his new backpack. How he had cried when his pet turtle died when he was 9, and how Frank had helped him build a special box to bury it in the backyard. I thought about holding his hand as we walked into the funeral home to make arrangements for Frank the last time he had truly needed me. The paramedics arrived in what seemed both an eternity and an instant. Their voices were professional but kind as they moved around me, checking vitals, asking questions I could barely focus enough to answer. "Is there someone we should call?" one of them asked as they transferred me to the stretcher. "My son," I said weakly, giving them Noah's number. "He's at a party." The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and motion. I caught fragments of conversation between the paramedics, words like elevated ST segments and possible myocardial infarction. Medical terms that translated to one simple truth: my heart was failing. In the emergency room, everything accelerated. Doctors in white coats, nurses moving efficiently around me, machines beeping with my unsteady heartbeat. Someone cut away my favorite cardigan, the blue one Frank had given me for our last Christmas together. I wanted to protest, but couldn't find the words. "Mrs. Thompson, you're having a heart attack," the ER doctor confirmed. "We're going to take you to the cardiac catheterization lab immediately. We need to clear the blockage in your artery." Fear washed over me in waves. "My son," I whispered to a nurse who was inserting an IV into my arm. "Please call my son." She nodded, taking the phone number I had already provided to the paramedics. As they wheeled me toward the cath lab, I heard her voice from somewhere behind me. "Hello? Is this Noah Thompson? This is Mercy Hospital, calling about your mother, Irene Thompson. She's been admitted with a heart attack and is heading into a procedure now." I couldn't hear Noah's response, but I saw the nurse's face change slightly. She glanced at me, then turned away slightly as she continued the conversation. "Yes, I understand it's a special occasion, but your mother's condition is serious. Yes, I can give you updates. The procedure should take about an hour, and then she'll be transferred to the intensive care unit." A pause. "Tomorrow morning would be—" "I see. Yes, I'll let her know when she's stable." My heart, already damaged, seemed to crack further. Tomorrow morning. Noah wasn't coming tonight. The birthday party was more important. The procedure itself passed in a medicated haze. I was awake but sedated as they threaded a catheter through my artery to clear the blockage. The cardiologist explained what he was doing in a steady voice, but I barely registered his words. All I could think about was Noah choosing to stay at Audrey's party instead of coming to his mother, who might be dying. Afterward, they moved me to the ICU. The room was dimly lit, filled with the soft beeping of monitors. A nurse adjusted my oxygen, checked my vitals, and asked if I needed anything for pain. I asked for my phone, which had been stored with my personal belongings. "Your son called while you were in the procedure," she told me as she handed me the phone. "He said he'll be here first thing tomorrow. He asked me to tell you he's sorry he couldn't come tonight." I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. When she left, I stared at my phone screen, willing it to light up with a message from Noah. Nothing came. I imagined him at the party, laughing, raising a toast to Audrey, while I lay connected to machines that kept me alive. The night stretched endlessly. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, administering medication. I dozed fitfully, waking often to the strange sounds of the hospital. Each time I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. Morning came, light filtering through the blinds of my ICU room. Still no Noah. The shift changed, new nurses introduced themselves. I picked at the breakfast they brought, tasteless eggs and cold toast. The cardiologist visited, explained that the procedure had been successful, but that I would need significant lifestyle changes and careful monitoring going forward. "Is your son coming today?" he asked. "I'd like to go over your care plan with both of you." "Yes," I said, though I was no longer certain. "He should be here soon." But the morning hours passed, and Noah didn't appear. Lunchtime came, a tray of bland chicken and cold Jell-O that I couldn't bring myself to eat. Finally, mid-afternoon, nearly 24 hours after I had been admitted, Noah arrived. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and yesterday's stubble shadowing his jaw. No Audrey in sight. "Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek quickly. "I'm sorry I couldn't come last night. The party went really late and I was exhausted." I wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could choose a party over his mother having a heart attack. Instead, I said, "It's okay. I understand." He glanced around the ICU room uncomfortably. "So what happened exactly?" The nurse didn't give me many details. I explained about the heart attack, the procedure, what the doctor had told me. Noah nodded occasionally, but I could tell he wasn't fully engaged. He kept checking his watch, his phone. "Where's Audrey?" I asked. though I already knew she wouldn't have come. She doesn't do well in hospitals, Noah said, as if that explained everything. Bad experiences as a kid. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. I wanted my son to hold my hand to tell me he was scared of losing me, to show any sign that what had happened mattered to him. Instead, he fidgeted with his phone, occasionally typing out messages to someone. "I can't stay too long," he finally said. "I have a meeting at work I couldn't reschedule." "On a Saturday?" I asked. He looked slightly flustered. "Yeah, it's a conference call with our overseas team. Time difference and all that." I nodded, pretending to believe him. "Of course. Work is important." "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised, already standing up. "You look good, though. The doctors must be taking good care of you." He left after less than 30 minutes, a quick peck on my forehead, and a promise to return the next day. As the door closed behind him, tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. A nurse coming in to check my vitals found me crying silently. "Are you in pain?" she asked, concerned. "Not the kind medication can help with," I replied. Over the next 5 days in the hospital, Noah's visits followed the same pattern. He would come for brief periods, always alone, always with an excuse about why he couldn't stay longer. Twice he canceled altogether, citing work emergencies. Audrey finally came once on my 4th day there. She stayed exactly 15 minutes, commented on the depressing atmosphere and how hospitals gave her anxiety, then left after a perfunctory wish for my quick recovery. As she was leaving, I overheard her whisper to Noah in the hallway, "This is taking forever. We're going to be late for dinner with my parents." The hospital staff became my real support system. A night shift nurse named Sarah, about my age with silver-streaked dark hair, would sit with me during the quiet hours when sleep wouldn't come. She brought me extra blankets without being asked, noticed when I didn't eat, and found foods I might tolerate better. "My husband was the same way when I had my surgery last year," Sarah confided one night. "Men can be so clueless sometimes. He thought bringing me a hamburger the day after gallbladder removal was a kind gesture." I appreciated her attempt to normalize my situation, to make Noah's behavior seem like typical male thoughtlessness, rather than the deeper rejection it felt like. But she and I both knew it was more than that. On my 5th night in the hospital, when Sarah found me crying again, she pulled a chair close to my bed. "Can I tell you something, Irene? Something my own mother told me years ago when I was going through my divorce." I nodded, grateful for the distraction from my thoughts. "She said that sometimes the people we give the most to appreciate us the least, and that there comes a point where you have to decide if you're going to keep pouring love into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, or if you're going to find somewhere new to direct that love somewhere. It will be valued." Her words stayed with me after she finished her shift, echoing in my mind as I lay awake watching the monitor tracking my heartbeat. I had given everything to Noah, my time, my resources, my unconditional love. And somewhere along the way, that giving had lost its value to him. It had become expected, taken for granted, perhaps even resented. For the first time, I began to consider what it would mean to stop giving so much of myself to someone who valued it so little. After a week in the hospital, they finally discharged me with a bag of medications, a list of follow-up appointments, and strict instructions about diet, exercise, and stress management. The discharge nurse asked who would be picking me up. I hesitated before calling Noah, knowing I had few other options. He arrived an hour later than promised, rushing in with keys already in hand. "Sorry I'm late, Mom. Conference call ran long." The ride home was quiet. Noah attempted small talk about the weather, a new restaurant he and Audrey had tried, careful topics that avoided any mention of my heart attack or his absence during my hospitalization. I responded with single words or brief phrases, too tired and heartsick for pretense. When we pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly as I had left it the night I called the ambulance, except now it felt like a stranger's home. Noah helped carry my bag inside, glanced at his watch, and said he needed to get going. "Audrey's waiting. We have plans tonight, but I left a casserole in the fridge, one of those meal kits she gets delivered. Just needs to be heated up." "Thank you," I said, standing in my living room, still wearing the hospital-issued non-slip socks under my shoes. "Call if you need anything," he said, already backing toward the door. "Maybe I'll stop by tomorrow to check on you." After he left, I stood in the silent house, Frank's photographs watching me from the walls, the furniture we had chosen together surrounding me, everything exactly as it had been for decades. But I felt like a different person now, someone who could no longer live in this museum of past happiness. I slowly climbed the stairs to our bedroom, Frank's and mine, where I had slept alone for 3 years. I looked at the king-sized bed we had shared, the 2 nightstands still arranged, as they had been when he was alive, his reading glasses still in the drawer where he had left them. That night I cried until there were no tears left. I cried for Frank, for the life we had built, for the son who no longer seemed to care, for the lonely woman I had become. And then, in the strange calm that follows complete emotional exhaustion, I made my decision. The next morning I called a real estate agent, whose sign I had seen in a neighbor's yard. Patricia arrived that afternoon, a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s who walked through my house with a professional eye, making notes on a tablet. "The market is excellent right now," she told me as we sat at my kitchen table. "Especially for established homes in good school districts. Even with minimal updates, I estimate we could list at around 550,000. The figure startled me. Frank and I had paid just under 100,000 for the house 35 years ago. I had no idea its value had increased so dramatically. "Would it sell quickly?" I asked. Patricia nodded. "In this neighborhood, with multiple bedrooms and that beautiful backyard, we'll have offers within days of listing, especially if we price it competitively." I took a deep breath. I'd like to move forward as quickly as possible. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparing the house for sale. I sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to discard. It was physically taxing, probably more than my doctors would have approved of so soon after a heart attack, but the activity felt cleansing. Each item I touched held memories. Frank's clothes still hanging in the closet, his favorite sweaters and jackets that still held a faint trace of his scent. Noah's childhood art projects and school awards I had carefully preserved. Photo albums documenting our family history. I selected the most meaningful items to keep, photographed others to preserve digitally, and let go of the rest. I decided not to tell Noah about my decision yet. He hadn't visited since bringing me home from the hospital, though he occasionally sent brief text messages asking how I was feeling. I replied with equally brief assurances that I was managing well. It wasn't entirely untrue. Despite the physical exertion of packing and sorting, I felt more energized than I had in years. Purpose had replaced stagnation. Patricia listed the house on a Thursday. By Monday, we had 7 offers, all above asking price. The highest offer came from a young couple expecting their first child, who had written a heartfelt letter about wanting to raise their family in a home with character and history. I accepted their offer immediately, with one condition: a quick closing. Within 2 weeks, all the paperwork was signed. I had found a small, sun-filled apartment in a senior community in Florida, near Sarasota, where Frank and I had once vacationed and promised ourselves we would retire someday. The rent was reasonable, especially considering my unexpected windfall from the house sale. The community had a pool, organized activities, and was walking distance to shops and restaurants. I arranged for a moving company to pack and ship the items I was keeping. I donated furniture to a women's shelter, books to the library, where I had volunteered kitchen items to a church program for families in need. With each item that left the house, I felt lighter. Noah still had no idea. He had called once during this time, mentioning he might stop by the following weekend. I made non-committal noises about my schedule, knowing I would be gone by then. On my final day in the house, I walked through each room, saying goodbye to the space that had contained so much of my life. In Noah's old bedroom, now empty except for a few boxes, I sat on the window seat where I used to read him bedtime stories. I had written him a letter explaining my decision and my new address. I placed it on the bare floor in the center of the room where he would see it when he eventually came by. Dear Noah, by the time you read this, I will have moved to Florida. I have sold the house and started a new chapter of my life. This decision wasn't made in anger or spite, but from a place of clarity that came to me in the hospital. Life is too precious and too short to spend it waiting for moments of connection that may never come. I love you, Noah. I always have, and always will. Nothing can change that. But I've realized that loving someone doesn't mean I should set aside my own needs and happiness. When I lay in that hospital bed alone, watching my phone for messages that didn't come, I understood that I needed to make a change. The proceeds from the house sale will allow me to live comfortably. I've left you the items I thought you might want in the garage labeled with your name. Everything else has been donated or will come with me. My new address is on the back of this letter. My door will always be open to you. But going forward, our relationship will need to be built on mutual respect and effort. I deserve that much. I hope you can understand that this isn't about punishing you. It's about finally taking care of myself, something I should have learned to do long ago. With love. Mom. The next morning, I took one last look at the house before climbing into the taxi that would take me to the airport. The early spring flowers Frank had planted years ago were just beginning to bloom in the front garden. I felt a pang of sadness at leaving them behind, but also a flutter of excitement about what lay ahead. The flight to Florida was smooth, the shuttle to my new apartment building efficient. My few shipped belongings wouldn't arrive for several days, so I had brought essentials in my suitcases. The apartment was small, but bright, with a balcony overlooking a garden courtyard. The property manager had left a welcome basket with fruit crackers and local information. I unpacked my suitcases, arranged the few personal items I had brought with me, a photograph of Frank, my favorite coffee mug, the quilt my grandmother had made for my wedding. The space felt new and full of possibility, so different from the weight of memories that had filled my old house. The first call from Noah came 3 days later. I had been wondering how long it would take him to discover I was gone. Mom. His voice was a mixture of shock and anger. What is going on? I just went by the house and there are strangers living there. They said they bought it from you, and I found your letter. Is this some kind of joke? I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. It's not a joke, Noah. I sold the house and moved to Florida, just like my letter explained. But why? His voice cracked slightly. Why would you do something so drastic without talking to me first? That was our family home. Yes, it was our family home. But the family changed. Frank is gone. You have your own home with Audrey. It was just me rattling around in those rooms full of memories. But to just leave, to sell everything without a word. He sounded genuinely hurt, which surprised me. What about all Dad's things? What about my stuff from growing up? I saved the important things for you. They're in storage unit 142 at Safekeep on Maple Street. I paid for 6 months so you have time to go through everything. I kept my voice even. As for Frank's things, I kept what mattered most to me, and I think he would understand that objects aren't what keep his memory alive. There was silence on the line for several seconds. When Noah spoke again, his voice was quieter. I don't understand, Mom. Is this because I couldn't come to the hospital right away when you had your heart attack? I explained about Audrey's birthday. It wasn't just the heart attack, Noah, I said gently. That was just the moment when everything became clear. For years now, I've felt like an afterthought in your life. I gave everything I had, my time, my savings, my unconditional support, and it never seemed to be enough. That's not fair, he protested. I have my own life, my job, my marriage. I can't be at your beck and call all the time. I never asked you to be, I replied. All I wanted was to matter, to be a priority sometimes, not just when it was convenient for you. When I was lying in that hospital bed, wondering if I might die and you chose not to come because of a birthday party, I realized how unbalanced things had become. The line went quiet again. I could hear Noah's breathing slightly uneven. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. I really messed up, didn't I? The simple admission broke something open inside me. We both did in different ways. I allowed the imbalance to continue because I was afraid of losing you entirely. But in the hospital, I realized I had already lost the relationship I thought we had. I'm sorry, Mom, he said softly. I never meant to make you feel unimportant. Everything just got so busy, and Audrey sometimes gets jealous of the time I spend with family, and work has been crazy. And I took you for granted because I knew you would always be there. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, I said. And I'm still here, Noah, just not in the same way as before. I need to build a life that makes me happy, not one spent waiting for crumbs of attention. Can I come see you? He asked. Maybe next month I want to see your new place to show you I can do better. I considered his request. I would like that. But I need you to understand that this is a new beginning for our relationship too. I will always love you unconditionally as my son, but my time and energy are valuable. I need that to be respected. I understand, he said, though I wondered if he really did. I'll call you to make arrangements. After we hung up, I stepped out onto my small balcony. The Florida air was warm and scented with flowers, so different from the still chilly New England spring I had left behind. Below me, a group of residents were gathering for an afternoon card game in the courtyard. One woman looked up, noticed me, and waved invitingly. The first weeks in my new home were an adjustment, but a welcome one. I joined a water aerobics class recommended by my cardiologist, made friends with my neighbors, and discovered a small bookstore within walking distance that hosted a weekly reading group. I hung Frank's photographs on my walls, but arranged them differently, interspersed with new artwork I found at a local gallery. Noah called regularly now, more than he had in years. Our conversations were sometimes awkward, but increasingly genuine. He asked questions about my new life, and actually listened to the answers. 2 months after my move, he and Audrey came to visit. The visit wasn't without tension. Audrey clearly felt uncomfortable in the senior community, making comments about it being so Florida, and asking several times if I was sure I wasn't bored living there. But she made an effort to be pleasant, which I appreciated. Noah seemed truly shocked by how happy I appeared. "You look good, Mom," he said as we walked along the beach near my new home. "Really good. More relaxed than I've seen you in years." "I feel good," I told him honestly. Making this change was scary, but it was the right decision for me. On their last night, Noah asked if we could talk alone. Audrey had gone to bed early, claiming a headache. We sat on my small balcony watching the sunset. "I want you to know that I've been thinking a lot about everything," he said. "About how I've treated you these past few years, especially after Dad died when you needed me most." I stayed quiet, letting him gather his thoughts. "When I got to the house and found you gone, I was angry at first, then scared, then just ashamed." He looked down at his hands. "I kept thinking about you having a heart attack, being alone and scared, and me choosing to stay at a stupid party instead of being there for you." "It hurt," I admitted, "more than I can express." "I know," he said softly, "and I can't undo it. But I want to do better going forward. I want to be the son you deserve." "I would like that," I said, reaching over to take his hand. "But Noah, this isn't just about what happened in the hospital. It's about building a relationship where we both feel valued." I needed to create some distance to see how unhealthy things had become. He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I get it now, I think. And I respect what you did, even though it was a shock. You're teaching me something important about standing up for yourself." After they left, I felt a cautious optimism about the future of my relationship with Noah. The visit hadn't magically fixed everything, but it was a start. We were talking more honestly than we had in years. As months passed, I settled deeper into my new life. I made friends, joined clubs, even started dating again, something I never thought I would do after Frank. I went on a cruise with a group from my complex, took art classes at the community college, and volunteered at a local animal shelter. Noah and I established a new pattern with regular phone calls and video chats. He and Audrey came to visit twice more that year, each visit a little more comfortable than the last. There were still moments of tension, still times when old patterns threatened to reemerge, but we both worked to maintain the healthier boundaries I had established. One evening, nearly a year after my move, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, a glass of wine in hand. My neighbor Joanna, who had become a close friend, joined me. "You know," she said, "when you first moved in, you had this look about you, like someone who had been through the ringer, but was determined to come out the other side. I see something different now." "What's that?" I asked. "Peace," she said simply. "You look at peace with yourself." She was right. The journey hadn't been easy, from that lonely night in the ICU to the difficult decision to sell my home and start over. But I had learned something vital along the way, that loving others shouldn't come at the expense of loving myself. Looking back on that night in the hospital, eating cold Jell-O alone while my son celebrated his wife's birthday, I now see it as the moment that saved me, not just physically, but emotionally. It forced me to recognize my own worth and to make the difficult but necessary changes to honor that worth. If you're watching this and feeling unappreciated by those you love most, remember that it's never too late to rewrite the rules of your relationships. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what no longer serves us, even when that something is a pattern in a relationship we cherish. I don't regret the years I spent giving everything to my family. That love was real and genuine. But I've learned that love should flow both ways, and that teaching others how to treat you with respect is an act of love too, for them and for yourself. Has someone in your life taken you for granted? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own well-being? Leave a comment below and share your story. I read every single one. And if this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Sharing these stories helps all of us feel less alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening to my story today. Remember, it's never too late to start again, to choose yourself, to find peace. I wish you all the courage to make the changes you need, whatever they may be.